4 lessons, I'm going to use one project to demonstrate several things. In this lesson, we're going to look at adding and displaying forms. And in the next lesson, I want to look at how to pass both to a dialog form and then back to a main form. How to create a custom dialog. We've used message boxes and we've used the input box from Visual Basic, but how do we create our own dialog box? And then how can we add menus and menu items to an application? I've created one application to demonstrate all 4 of these things. So here's my application on Mount Rushmore, and I'll provide you the graphics for this form and the other forms we're going to use, as well as the text. It's all available in our Canvas course site. But we first want to look at how to add and display additional forms. So each of these 4 buttons on the forward presence depicted on Mount Rushmore open up another form. So I'm going to click the Washington button, and it opens up another form over here about George Washington. And originally I made this the same length as this form, so they're kind of side by side, but then I added in the menus and that kind of brought this one down. But the idea here is that this form shows up to the right of our main form, and it is what we call a modal form, in that you must interact with this form before you can do anything else. So I can't come over and click another button or do anything on this form until I have closed this form. So this form in Washington simply shows this picture, the name, and some information taken from Wikipedia, which I'll provide to you. When I close this, you'll notice that the main form title bar becomes blue again because it gets the focus again, and so it comes back over. Now wherever this form is, it opens up next to the right of that form. And so I've coded this so that the form location is related to my main form location. Here's Jefferson, same thing. Roosevelt, and Lincoln. So in this lesson, we're going to look at how to create those forms and navigate to them, display them. In the next lesson, we'll look at how to pass values. When I open up another form, open up Washington, and I close it, it passes some values or passes some data back to this form from this particular form, and it displays it down here. Data passed, Washington was last viewed. If I go to Roosevelt, when I close Roosevelt, it passes that data back. Data passed, Roosevelt was last viewed. And there's Lincoln was last viewed. So that's how we pass data. Now on the Roosevelt, I pass data to the opening form. I send a quote to that form, which is displayed down here. Speak softly and carry a big stick. So we'll look at how to pass data from our main form, or the form that we're calling, to open up and have it displayed. In video 07C, we're looking at how to create a custom dialog. So here's a custom dialog in which I can change the back color of my main form. I'm going to make it a very light yellow. Change the color of my text. Let's make it an orange. And I can change the color of my buttons. Right now they're Alice blue, but maybe I want to make them a brighter yellow. So I've changed those 3 swatches. These are just labels that are calling the color dialog. But when I click accept, it's going to pass these color values back to my main form and change the colors. So we're using the idea of passing values in creating our custom dialog. And then finally, we're going to look at how to add a menu and menu items. So I have an exit button, exit menu item here. I have the presidents, Washington. So opens up that form. Jefferson, Roosevelt, Lincoln. And then there's an about menu here with 2 items. About this program brings up a dialog box or a message box. Tells about the purpose of this program, what it accomplishes, and then about this class, the C# cohort at South Mountain Community College. So that's the project we're going to create over the next 4 videos. Let's go into Visual Studio. So before we go to Visual Studio, let's go into our Canvas course site and let's get the graphics and the text we're going to use in this project. So if you go to the Modules area and scroll down, you're going to find Unit 7 on Multiple Forms, Menus, Video Poker Project. And there is a zip file here called Mount Rushmore. You can click on that and then download it. So I'm going to click on the download and I'm going to save this. And I'll put this in my downloads folder. I'm going to save, and then I'm going to open that folder and unzip my files. So here then is my folder for Mount Rushmore, and it contains my images for each of the presidents and Mount Rushmore itself. Those were all taken from the Wikipedia Commons wiki site. And then the text, which is a Microsoft Word document, contains some text that I copied and pasted from Wikipedia. And so we're free to use this text. There's a paragraph here about Mount Rushmore and then a paragraph about each of the presidents. Okay, so now let's go on ahead to Visual Studio. I've created a new project and called it 07A Multiple Form Demo. And I took my Form 1 and gave it a size of 500, 600. And then I added a picture box. I didn't bother to name my picture box. And I sized it to the image, but if you want to do it the exact size that I have it here, it's 476 by 296. What we're going to do is we're going to load in an image. And those are the images we got from Canvas. So I'm going to open up the images, go to Import, and go find those images that we downloaded. And mine are here. I'm going to bring all 5 of these in. Jefferson, Lincoln, Mount Rushmore, Roosevelt, and Washington. We'll end up using all 5 of these. So I'm going to bring all 5 of those in. And then I'm going to choose Mount Rushmore. We'll place that in our picture. And I set the size mode to stretch image. I'm going to make sure we don't distort that. So that actually looks really good. Then I added 4 buttons. And these are simply named BTN Washington, BTN Jefferson, BTN Roosevelt, and BTN Lincoln. And those 4 buttons are going to open up our 4 different new forms. I added a text box, called it LBL Info. And for the text, I copied that first paragraph on Mount Rushmore from the text that I provided you. And then I added another label down here with my copyright information. Okay, so that's our form. We're going to add a new form to our project. So the way we add a new form is I'm going to come over to my Solution Explorer. I'm going to right-click on my project underneath the solution. So my project is 07A Multiple Form Demo. I'm going to right-click on there, and then I'm going to come down and choose Add. And in the pop-up menu, I have several options, but one of those is to add a Forms or Windows Forms. I'm going to name this one Form Washington. It's going to be a C# class, so it ends in a .cs. I'm simply going to say add. And now I see that form, and I can toggle between those 2 forms up here at the top in the design mode. Well, on my Form Washington form, I'm going to set the size to be 280, 600. And then for the text of that form, let's just change it to say George Washington. I'm going to add a picture box. And the size of my picture box is going to be the size of my images, and that is 250 by 250. So I'm just going to come in here and set the size, 250, 250, and just position it. You can use the cursor arrows. I want it kind of centered, just a slight margin, kind of all the way around, left, right, top, about the same. And let's set the image to that image of Washington. So I can come to the image, and I can choose Washington, and click OK. Now I'm going to take a label, and we're going to set the text as label to George Washington. and let's make it bolder. So we're going to change the font. Leave it Microsoft Sans Serif, but I want to bold 14. All right, then I'm going to do another label. I'm going to set the auto size to false. And I'm going to go back to my Word document and copy the text about George Washington. And I'll paste that into the text. So there's my form. Now I want to code Form 1 to open up this form. So I'm going to double click on the Washington button. I'm going to move my properties panel out of the way. And I'm going to create a new form. I'm just going to call it FRM Pres with a Z equals new form Washington. And I'm going to put parentheses after that. This is a method called a constructor. We're going to look at classes in about another week. We'll start looking at creating our own classes. And in our classes, we create a constructor which builds a new class. Our form Washington is a class. It ends in a .cs. It's a C# class. And so when we call new form Washington with parentheses, it creates a new instance of that form. Now that form is not yet being displayed, and we're going to do some things to choose where we want this form to be displayed. So I can take my new form, which I'm calling FRM Pres, and I can set the top property equal to, and I'm going to call this, that's my main form, this is my form 1, and I want to set it equal to the top of that form. Then I'm going to set FRM Pres dot left. Where's the left side of my form going to be? And it's going to equal this dot left. But I also want to add to that this dot width, because I want it to be all the way over past the right side of this. And let's give it about an extra, well, let's say maybe 20 pixels. And then I want to do FRM Pres dot show, and we have two options here. We have show and show dialog. The show will give us a modeless window or a modeless form in which we can interact and go between the two forms. The show dialog will give us a modal form. I'm going to do show just to show you that idea first. So let's just do show. I'm going to start and run this. So I click Washington and I get Washington up here. Now it didn't put it where I wanted it to go over here on the right, and I forgot to do one thing, so I'm going to close that and show you one thing I need to do. We're going to go back to our code. Let's go to form Washington, and there's one property I forgot to set, and that is a critical one where we want this to be placed. I'm going to click on my form, and there is a position, there's a property called start position, and right now it's Windows default location, which gives it kind of a cascading effect from the top left. That's not what I want. So there's some choices here. I can center it on the screen. I can choose Windows default bounds, which I've never used. I can center it in the parent, so it's center inside our form 1. But really what I want here is manual. I'm going to tell it where to set it. We've done that already with our code. So in our code, we've said we want to set the top of that form equal to our main form, or form 1 top, and then 20 pixels basically to the right of that form 1. So let's try this again. I'm going to run it again. I'm going to click Washington. There it manually places it where I specified it to go. And this is a Modeless form, so I can go back and forth between the two. In fact, I can move this one around, make it the top one, click back here, make it the top, and so forth. Now let's change this to a modal form. Before I change this, let me do one more thing to demonstrate one other aspect of Modeless forms, and that is I can create multiples of these. If I create a modal form, I can't create multiples because I can't come back and click this button again. So this is creating multiple instances of that particular form. There may be times when you want to do that, but most times that's not my interest in doing that. So we're going to come back here and set this to a modal form by changing show to show dialog. I'm going to run this again. And now I can't come back over and click my form 1. I've got to close this one first. I close it, I can come back, I can open it again. I can't, though, create multiple instances of it. So that's how we create a new form and create an instance of it, specify where we want the size, and set it up as a modal or modeless window form. Let's create our other forms for Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. What I'm going to do is right-click on my project, go to Add, Form, Windows Form. This one will be Form Jefferson. I'm going to say Add. Again, I'm going to set the size of this to be 280 by 600. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to go to my Form Washington, and I'm going to simply select all 3 of these. I just dragged a box through all 3. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to go back to Jefferson, and I'm going to paste, and just kind of position these in the same spot. Give myself a little bit of a margin, top left and bottom from the picture. I want to change now that image to Jefferson. I want to change the text of this label to say Thomas Jefferson. And change the text of my LBL info label to the Thomas Jefferson information. Let's create our Roosevelt the same way. Right click on the project, add, form. This one's going to be Form Roosevelt. We'll set it to 280, 600. I'm going to go back to Form Washington, copy all 3 of those items, come back to Roosevelt, paste, and I will move those into place. Change the image. Change the text. And change the text of this. And then finally, let's do Lincoln. So we'll call this one, of course, Form Lincoln. .280 by 600. That's the size. Come back to Form Washington. Select everything. Copy it. And paste. And again, we'll just move this into place. Change our image to Lincoln. Our name text. And the text of our information label to reflect the paragraph about Lincoln. So now we have our 4 forms created. I'm going to drag the properties out of the way. I'm going to go back to my Form 1 design. I'm going to double click on Jefferson. And we can basically copy and paste the same information in. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to create another method. And we're going to say private void. I'm going to call my method show president. And I'm going to pass it a form. We're going to call it XYZ. So I've got some code that's going to basically be pretty much the same. And that is this information here on form pres. I'm just going to cut that and put it down here in my show pres. And then here we'll call show president. And I'm going to pass it frm pres. So I'm going to change each of these to XYZ. And then all I need to do is copy these 2 lines and paste. So here we want a form Jefferson. And let's just try those 2. Make sure they still work. I'm going to run my project. There's Washington. And there's Jefferson. Now I need to set that startup position for my other forms. Forgot to do that again. I need to close my application. I'm going to set the startup position for Lincoln to be manual. I'll do the same thing for Roosevelt. And the same thing for Jefferson. Let's test this again. Washington and Jefferson. So let's now create our code for the other 2 buttons for Roosevelt and Lincoln. So here's Roosevelt. All I'm going to do is copy this information, paste it. Let's change this from form Jefferson to form Roosevelt. And then we'll do the same thing for Lincoln. And you might be wondering why I bothered to do this show president when I've got only 3 lines being, really only 2 lines being saved, because we added another line on each of these. But we might do some more things with show president. In fact, we will as we continue into the next videos. Let's just test this. And so now we should have Roosevelt and Lincoln. One nice thing about this, if I decide I want that form a little bit closer, by doing it this way, I only have to change maybe this from a 20 to a 10 here and not in those 4 different other buttons. So that's another advantage. So now when we test this, it should show up a little bit closer and slightly closer. In the next video, we'll look at how to pass data from our form back to our main form, and how to also send data from the main form to our new form that we're opening up. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.